When you look at the Buddhist text, later you'll find the Dharma, the highest Dharma, that one always can save you is only the Four Noble Truths, basically. All right. Let's go on, I guess.
Dharma is textual tradition.
Yeah. You remember textual tradition. Yeah.
It goes back to the teachings heard directly from the Buddha. These teachings were, it seems, memorized by the immediate followers of the Buddha. For several generations, the teachings of the Buddha were preserved and handed down directly from the master to children orally, without ever being committed to writing. It is tempting for us in the modern world to be skeptical about the reliability of this method of transmission. It was the form in ancient India, the use of mnemonic techniques such as the numbered lists and the frequent repetition of certain portions of the material within a given text aided reliable transmission. Indeed, the evidence of the transmission of the Vedic text, for example, is that oral transmission can be more reliable than the tradition of written text involving the copying of manuscripts.
Okay, thank you. You know, still actually that still happening in India too. The Brahmin, and you could say the priest caste, people, especially if they are highly educated from many generations, and then what they would do is that when the kid was little, they started to, recite the text to the kids, and the kids had to follow the father. And the first thing before the kids have to learn the meaning of the so-called religious scripture, they have to learn how to recite the text. And even I met few of them in India, and then they can recite all the text, And not only in India, even in earlier time, even maybe now, but not that many. For example, like one of the temple I used to live in Sri Lanka, the master, he just passed away. He passed away maybe 10, 15 years ago. But anyway, he could recite the whole Jataka commentary. It's this big, okay? And that's why in those days you don't have a computer, right? If you have some of the manuscript, you do have a manuscript kind of different word, maybe omit or some word are different. You have confused about why this Pali word is like that and so forth. They all come to consult him. He's like a dictionary. He will tell you that word comes how many times, And traditionally, every monk are supposed to follow the teacher's tradition first. Like you're going to learn later about their different texts. Like you have the long discourse, you have the middle length discourse, you have the other discourse. For example, the long discourse, if you belong to a long discourse teacher, you have to learn all, recite all, okay? Every day, morning, the first thing you need to do, wake up to and just chant. Don't forget, you're not reciting your own language, you're reciting Pali, okay? So that was, even nowadays, most of the monks, they know how to recite the Vinaya code, the monk discipline, and then also they learn how to recite Dhammadipa, okay? And that's the most basic thing. 法句经, okay. In India, it's the same thing. And one of the teachers, even I never met him, but one of my very good friends, when he studied Sanskrit in India, he happened to have a tutor. The tutor is a Brahmin, of course, and because usually Brahmin are very good at Sanskrit, because that's their job. And Sanskrit is a dead language in India already. And he said his tutor could recite Panini grammar. Grammar text written in the 4th century, this big, translate into English. He could recite all the Panini in Sanskrit. Okay. That's why I say when you talk about tradition, Chinese people think they are very traditional. No, think about India. I always say just one example, food, and look at the Indian people wearing the same thing. Whether you like or not is another question, but imagine. All right, just let's go to the next paragraph.
In the early phase of their transmission, then the only access to Buddhist texts was by hearing them directly from someone who had heard and learned them from someone else. This oral transmission of the text being an activity that went on primarily within the community of monks. Even after this text began to be committed to writing, their study was primarily a monastic concern. Thus, the ordinary lay Buddhist access to Buddhist teachings was always through the Sangha. He or she learned the Dharma by sitting in the presence of a monk or nun and listening to their exposition of the teachings. Thus, in so far as a monk or nun necessarily follows a way of life defined by the prescriptions and the rules of Buddhist monasticism. The study of Buddhist theory always took place in the context of practice. It is only in the 20th century, with the arrival of the modern printed book in traditional Buddhist societies and the demand in the West for books and information on Buddhism, that this state of affairs has begun to change. That is, for over 2 million.
Millennia.
2
million. Okay, 2 millennia.
It was only by some form of contact with the living tradition of practice that there could be any knowledge of Buddhism.
All right, thank you. I guess anything that, no question and no comment, right? Right. Now, why don't we do you think you need a break? No, looks like nobody wants a break, okay? We can continue. Are you sure that you have a spirit to continue? All right, good. So now we come to the next subtitle, is the first recitation of scriptures, the 4 Nikayas, Agamas, and the Vinaya. Nikayas, Chinese usually translates Nikaye, okay? But Agama is more famous, Ahan, okay? They bear the similarity. But anyway, I don't know, I forgot whether they discussed them, but just remember there were 4 of the Nikayas or Agama, and then the Vinaya. Vinaya means 律藏的律, the Vinaya means the 戒律的律, 律藏, okay? All right, so do you want to read?
Sure.
Okay.
According to a generally accepted ancient tradition, the first attempt to agree the form of Buddhist textual tradition, what was remembered as the authoritative word of the Buddha, took place some 3 months after the Buddha's death at the town of Rajgarh.
It's okay. It should be Rajagriha, or Gruha Griha. Just remember, there's a dot you need to just put I there, I with the I, yeah.
Okay. in northern India when 500 arahats took part in a communal recitation.
Sangiti. Mm-hmm.
Sankiti.
Mm-hmm.
This event is commonly referred to in modern writings as the first Buddhist council. Significantly, the earliest Buddhist tradition attempts to resolve any tension between theory and practice by insisting that the first communal recitation of scriptures was carried out by 500 individuals who had each realized direct and perfect knowledge of Dharma. According to the accounts of this communal recitation, what was remembered of the Buddha's teachings fell into two classes: the general discourses of the Buddha, the sutras, and his prescriptions for the lifestyle of the Buddhist monk, the discipline, or vinaya.
Mm-hmm.
Some accounts suggest there was a third category, matikas.
Yeah, matrikas, yeah.
Matrikas, or summary mnemonic list of significant points of the teaching. At any rate, later canonical collections of Buddhist writings were subsequently often referred to as the three baskets.
Tripitaka.
Tripitaka.
Okay.
The basket of discipline, the basket of discourses, and the basket of further Dharma.
Abhidharma.
Abhidharma.
Mm.
Whose whole development is in part related to the use of the summary mnemonic lists for matrikas.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Well, I guess it's very important. It's also very different from other religions. It's actually, at least the early Buddhist texts believe that being passed down from the time, even orally, passed down, orally from the time that after the Buddha passed away, 3 months after the Buddha passed away, at the Rajagruha. Anyone know the story? Let me see that whether they have mentioned. No. The Buddha passed away in the when he passed away, and then there was actually then of course everybody was busy and either mourning for the Buddha or busy for something else. But then one of the monks didn't arrive, But after the Buddha's corpse still lie on, anyway, in some place, we don't know where. And lots of kings, queens from different countries, and they come to worship the Buddha, come to see the Buddha. And we also know that's why last time when I was in Harvard, also one of the professors came to give deliver a paper was saying that to understand the historical how they criminate the king, then only information we have is how they criminate the Buddha, because it's for sure that the king requested in India in those days that the Buddha has to be cremated as the king, So that's how the Buddhist history is very different from other religion. So he was worshipped by lots of kings in India in those days. And then, anyway, so then that's why his body was lying on there for lots of people to witness, to see, and to pay their last respect. That including the Buddha's mother. Anyone know the Buddha's false mother, not mother, false mother, foster mother? What's her name? Huh?
Start with an M.
I thought that's her birth. Didn't his birth mom die?
Yeah, his birth mom died, but his foster mother. That means his birth mom's sister. Actually, his mother's sister, after he died, traditionally, then his sister married to the king. Yeah, and then the younger sister, and the sister looked after the Buddha when he was like a little child. Yeah. So, Prajapati, okay, Prajapati, and it's okay. Its name is Prajapati. And even he also look at his, also worship his, you could say the Buddha's, the corpse or what. And then anyway, on the way, there was one of the monk called the Kashyapa, They don't want to cremate the Buddha yet because they want to wait one of the Buddha's older student who had, after believing, after gain arahantship or attain enlightenment, he basically lived in the forest because he used to live in the forest. Kashyapa, Kashyapa. In Chinese it's called Jasa, but in English you have to remember it's called Kashyapa. If you say Jasa, nobody knows who is Jasa. Okay. Actually, the old word 家 in those days named caste, not 不是读家的. So it's just because nowadays, anyway, Kassapa, on the way back, knowing that Buddha passed away, he wanted also has to, pay the last respect to the Buddha. On the way, and he heard someone was very happy. Oh, was so happy that the Buddha passed away. And he was surprised. And how could that the master pass away? They're so happy. He say, because the Buddha master always tell me not to do this, not to do that. So now the Buddha passed away, I'm free now. I don't have to be, I'm free now. So, and according all actually either Tibetan tradition or Chinese or either Pali, they have this. What I said is all identical. Okay, at least in other words, you could say all agree that So all identical have the same sources saying that, and then the Kassapa was thinking, when I go back there, I need to really have to think about that how to keep the Buddha's word down. Otherwise, it will have a huge problem. And that is actually also learned from one of the important incidents, even though it's not mentioned here. Incident is before the Buddha passed away, just about maybe 15 to 20 years before passed away, I think something like that. Actually, one of the Greek masters in India passed away, the Zen master, China Jiao, the Zen master, called Nigandhanatha Buddha. Okay, I don't know, Zen, I just write it in English, Zen. Okay. Nowadays you call Jainism, okay? And now still Jain are vegetarian, and still most of the Jain are vegetarian, okay? Actually, lots of Buddhist teaching, when they transmit to other abroad country, highly influenced by this religion. Anyway, Jain is called Nigandhanatha Buddha, and he passed away. The problem is when he passed away, there was a big dispute between what the Jain master were taught them. That's why even now if you go to India, they have two schools. One is completely naked. Jain actually as a Mahavira. His name is Mahavira. Sometimes, not name, his name is Nigandhanatha Buddha. Of course, they don't address his name. They only always address it as a Mahavira. In Chinese, means 大雄. It's not 叮当那个大雄哈，不是小叮当里面的大雄。Okay. So, and when he passed away, he himself actually is a naked. He believed that the ascetic, those who had renounced the life, to become a monk, to be so-called a monk means renouncer, so they have to be not to wear anything. So that's why in India, still you could see the naked now. Only nowadays, unfortunately, it depends on how you look at it. This is modern time, highly influenced by the West, I would say. So now in India, the big city, these naked people cannot go there anymore. Like New Delhi, anyway, big city, they are not allowed this naked to go to big city anymore. But depends on how you look at it. Of course, in the West would be say, wow, what it is. But they are really believe that if they are really practice, they don't want to wear anything. They don't want to attach to anything. They are very strict. They are the one, to Buddhist understand, they practice self-modification, okay? Kushina, okay? Anyway, when he passed away, so there's a split between whether, many things, but one of the main thing is whether naked or not naked. So that's why you could see the other school now still retain. These two schools still retain. So generally they split into two. One is not naked, one is naked. And the not naked one, they will wear the white clothes. You might see that even I saw many times, every time I was in India, if you go to train station, you will see it. You saw the people who wear the white clothes and they put this mask here, okay? And then they have a kind of bloom. And then whenever they walk, they will just sweep the bloom. Because, why? Because this school is very strict. They believe that if they step on anything living thing die on the ground, they have a big sin. They have committed bad karma. Okay, and Buddhism don't believe that, because if you are unintentionally you kill those things, you have no bad karma. Maybe they hate you. That's another thing. But you don't commit karma. Okay, right? You know what I'm saying? Uh,
Jain the same ones that they like grow their facial hair and have like this big wrap on their head?
you mean the turban, like
yeah,
a turban?
and then they like carry like a knife in their hand?
That's the not Jain. That is actually came very later. I think it's 12th century, 14th century. I think it's 16. I forgot. That is called Sikh. The Sikh religion is a combination of the Muslim and Indian religion, the Hindu. Sikh, yeah. Of course, so that's why they worship their teacher who really found the God message. Because Indian religion believe in the God, like Muslim also believe in the God. So he kind of combination of the two. And then they have based on these two texts, they also have their master words. Yeah, that's the Sikh religion. Yeah. They are a very unfortunate kind of people. We look at from the war zone because whenever there's any war, they have to go to that area. That's why from the very young before they really become a Sikh religion, they were always a warriors because they have to learn how to fight all the time. After when they have this religion also, these native Indian also hate them, or even Muslim also hate them because they say you are not Muslim and then you are not Hindu like that. That's why also they also kind of been taught that they need to have the knife all the time. Yeah. Anyway, that's another. No. Jain is usually when you look at the Jain people, they have to cut. On the contrary, they shave off. They have to look very clean. And kind of like Buddhism. Buddhism somehow, even Buddha never said that, but somehow traditionally, they don't encourage people like having a big beard. Because I mean, this has back to the Indian tradition. When you have a big beard, kind of looks you're very like a murderer, kind of. The way they depict the people having a big beard is like a murderer. I mean, this is a cultural kind of thing, yeah. But Jain is really usually no. Usually people, if they become an ascetic of the Jain, like a naked, they have to shave. They might be retain this kind of beard, they might allow. But most of the beard they have to shake. Even all the hair they need to shake it off. Yeah, even the armpits also. Armpit hair they have to shake. But in Buddhism, it's on the contrary. You cannot shave. You may shave the beard hair. You cannot shave the armpits. Yeah. Anyway, right? Yes.
They could also have a bowl for a pot. I mean, I had a coworker.
Okay. No, the bowl actually. To take the bowl, it's definitely not the Jain. According to strict rule, I'm not saying the modified Jain now. I'm saying in the historical Jain, the Jain monk, they have to bear the food. They cannot have anything. So they have to use the hands. Yeah.
Even that is possession.
Yeah, they know. Yeah. And actually, like just maybe 20 years ago, there was a big news in India. I'm not familiar, but I knew that news. It was true. One of the rich men in India, he's a Jain. And also in India, lots of rich men are Jain because they know from early time they cannot be a farmer. Because to be a farmer, you have to kill a lot of insects. So that's why most of the Jain are very big businessmen. Okay, they only do business or either be politician. Because professionally they cannot be a farmer. So because the teachings. So and then one of the very rich men renounced life, become naked monk also. There was a big news. Yeah. And I have some of my classmates when I was in England, they are Jain as well. As I say, in general, people think about Jain people means they're vegetarian, they're very rich. This is just a stereotype, I'm not saying this is true, but just a stereotype. Okay. All right. Oh, I forgot to say. So that's why I split. That actually influenced Buddhism too, because then the Buddhism, Ananda also lots of monks knew the news about that. So it's when you learn the Buddhist history, and then that's how believe that why later on, when Kasapa proposed that the text had to be retained, and then after the Buddha passed away 3 months, then they start to have Ren retreat. That's why you can count when the Buddha was passed away. I mean, the Ren retreat usually start on July. Okay, it start on July, and so that's why. And then during in India, July up to the November, there's a rainy season. So, and then the monks rainy season, they believe that it's not very inconvenient for them to go out to get food. So that's why you should stay in the place and just practice the meditation. So, and that's why in Chinese we call it 佛欢喜乐, because it's believed that after 3 months, a lot of people attend Arahanshi will attend sainthood, become either in training or not in training. Okay. Okay.
So if
Yes.
Buddha's body was exposed like outside for so long, like wasn't it decomposing?
No, he was not outside for so long. Actually, I cannot remember how long it kept the body. Not that that's a good question. I should maybe one day put attention. I didn't pay attention how long the body was kept, or maybe not clear about that. It said he just the text was recited after 3 months of he passed away, because when he passed away, because that was a tradition already during the Buddha's time. That means even when the Buddha was alive. So during that season, they had to gather together, stay together. So and then they took that as the time that the king was also sponsored the food. Okay, the kings was sponsored the food. So and they would take that time as people can gather together and start to discuss what do you learn from the Buddha. And then Ananda, I want to put the story short, is Ananda was selected, the last minute anyway. He was selected to be the judge of the text. And Upali, actually Upali was a low caste person. I guess that's so deliberately also. He was a low caste, but they also believe he's an Arahant, mean the fully enlightened one. The enlightened one. So he was the one who in charge of become like a judge, like a decision, the final decision person for the monastic codes. That was the two things. Definitely was the first time when they have a recitation. Okay, not that the Buddha body was kept there for 3 months. No.
Is that true? Buddha 在
In other words, I would like to say that before you ask a question.
在举起来
No, I didn't hear about that. No.
from the coffin.
But the last
Someone visit.
disciple
Kapasa.
can
So the legend is when Kapasa arrives and then Buddha
Kasaba.
show the food.
food kind of stick out of the coffin for him
Yeah.
to see.
I don't know. I cannot remember that legend. It might have a lot of story adding, or maybe true. I don't know. Yeah.
But then also the legend
Yeah.
says the Kapasa.
Kasaba, not kapasa. Kasaba.
He was punished to stay in the world.
No. That was
That's the legend.
no. Those are the Chinese legend.
Also in Yunnan region in the
No. I think, please, you have to, when you study in more like academic, Kasaba, you have to learn what the text say, not what hearsay. Okay. Even though you may question the text, but you have to learn what the text say first. Don't learn it. Don't take the hearsay. I mean, you are not kid now. You could say a lot of story for the kid, but you have to.
What is the custom?
Kasaba 就是加色 the word, because some people still read kapasa. No, it's a kasaba. Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. I think who is going to read the next one is 3 principal canons. So we know that at least that the earlier one, he said it very clear that there were 2, and then there must be 3rd one. If you want to consider there was a 3rd, later what we call the Sanzan, Tripitaka. And then that was Matrika. Matrika in Chinese is called Benmu. I know this is a big topic, but anyway, in Chinese. Benmu. Unless you really study very, otherwise, Matrika actually is, in other words, they believe that maybe in the earlier, after the Buddha cremated, after the Buddha cremated 3 months, when it start to recite the text, you have this agama and you have the vinaya. That means and then the sutra, or you could say the sutra and then the vinaya. Okay, the discipline code. And then you have one is called matrika or matika in Pali or matrika in Sanskrit. In Chinese translate Benmu. What does it mean by the Benmu or the matrika? It's actually a list of the Dharma. Okay, it's just a list of the Dharma. But that actually later on expand into what we learn, what they call about Abhidharma. Anyway, we are not going to discuss this topic now. The next section. So that means it's quite no doubt that even they are not only discuss that, they also like to, because the sutra is always like a story, where the Buddha was, what person he met, what happening, and then when he met this person, or when what blah blah blah, and then what kind of teaching he was given, and at the end whether they're happy or not happy, and who is happy, who is not happy, something like that, right? Of course, usually when you want to cap the thing, is always cap they're happy. Why you want to cap the thing? They are not happy. Yeah, they are few, but even they are few. The cap they are not happy is because too difficult for them. All right, and then but the Matrika is almost like you take out all these important lists. For example, what is mean five aggregate? Wu Yun. What is the five aggregate as a list? Four Noble Truths as a list, right? 37 factors of enlightenment as a list. For example, five kind of study as a list, and so forth. This is a list. There's a list.
Just like a content?
Yeah, almost like a content. Yeah, like a content. I guess maybe more like a content. Yeah. All right. Let's go there, but we must understand. Even the Tripitaka understand in the Pali, or you could say the early Buddhism is like that. But when they go to other country, it might understand a little different. Okay, so right. Anyone or you? Do you want to read it? Okay, sure.
Three principal canons of Buddhism scripture survive today, corresponding to the three main traditional of living Buddhism: the Pali or Theravada canon of the southern tradition of Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia, the Chinese Tripitaka of the eastern tradition of China, Korea, and Japan, and the Tibetan Kanju and the Tenju of the northern tradition of the Tibet and the Mongolia. All three of these collections are extensive modern printed edition of the Pali canon, run to some 50 moderately sized volumes. The Tenju edition of the Chinese Tripitaka comprise 55 volumes, each containing some 1,000 pages of Chinese characters. Together, the Tibet Kanju and the Tenju comprise 300 traditional Pali volumes. When the contents of these canons are comprised, it is apparent that while significant portion of the Pali canon are parallelized in the Chinese collection, and there is considerable overlap between the Chinese Tripitaka and the Kanju and the Tanju. Buddhism as a whole does not possess a canon of scripture in the manner of the Hebrew Bible or Judaism, the Old and the New Testament of Christianity, of the Quran or of Islam. It is also apparent that the Chinese and Tibetan canon do not represent in block translation of the ancient Indian canonical collections of Buddhism texts, but rather liberal of the translation of individual Indian work made over the centuries. See chapter 10. In the case of the Chinese canon, the process of translating Indian texts began in the 2nd century CE and continue for over 800 years. The process of arranging and cataloging these texts continue down to the present century. In the case of Tibetan Kanjo and Tenjo, the translation process was carried out between the 7th and the 13th centuries, while the precise contents and arrangement of these two collections has never been fixed.
All right. Any question about that? Any comment? No? Wow, very good. I don't have to say so much. Next one, okay.
Well, of the Pali canon, the use of the term Pali as the name of the language of the Theravada canon of Buddhist scripture derives from the expression Pali Bhasa, the language of the Buddhist text. This language is an ancient Indian language closely related to Sanskrit, the language of classical Indian culture par excellence. At the time of the Buddha, Sanskrit appears to have been very much the language of Brahmanical learning and religious ritual. The Buddha therefore seems to have deliberately and consciously eschewed Sanskrit, preferring to teach in the ordinary vernacular the various Middle Indo-Aryan dialects known as Prakrit, which were spoken across the north of India in the 5th century BCE. In the 1st century or so, after the death of the Buddha, as Buddhism began gradually to spread across the Indian subcontinent, different groups of monks and the evolving school of Buddhism appear to have preserved their own versions of the Buddha's teaching orally in their local dialect. However, as time passed, there was a tendency for the language of the scripture to become frozen and increasingly removed from any actual spoken dialect. At the same time, Sanskrit was becoming less an exclusively Brahmanical language and more the accepted language of the Indian culture. The language in which to communicate learning and literature right across India. Thus, Buddhist scripture was subject to varied degree of Sanskritization. Translation is too strong here since the order of difference between Middle India and Sanskrit is similar to that between modern English and Chaucer's or Mallory's English. Although basically Middle Indo-Aryan, the language of Pali Canon is thus something of a hybrid, preserving in linguistic features of several dialects and showing some evidence of Sanskritization.
All right. Okay. Any question? Any comment? No. Oh. All right. Huh?
Yeah. I thought Pali was a language, but now it seems like it was something else.
So what else?
Middle Indo-Aryan or
Pali was a dialect, right? Yeah. Actually, now this is also only recent found. Like 20 years ago, before they bombed this Burmese Buddha in Afghanistan, right? And actually, before that, there were lots of scholars knew that, lots of collectors would say, and they knew that there were lots of Buddhist scriptures around. So some people went there and buy the scriptures, and especially after the Burmese was bombed, because then that become like a main focus, and then people also take that chance to announce that they do have the scripture they found from that area. So, and those scriptures is different. They are not preserved from the ola leaf, a kind of palm tree leaf, like in the Pali Canon. Originally they were written on the Beiye in Chinese called ola leaf. But actually they were preserved on the kind of bark, a kind of skin of the tree. But because those areas were the desert area, quite dry, so they kept it on a container. Anyway, there was scripture were found, but you find a lot of different kind of language over there. That's what we call Prakrit. Actually, the word Prakrit, it's not designed for mean one kind of language. Prakrit means kind of mixed language. Anything is very similar to Sanskrit, but it's out of Sanskrit, but it's not Sanskrit. It's called Prakrit, okay? Now, tell me, which religion also uses Prakrit? We just mentioned about him, that religion. Jain. Jain is a religion still using the Prakrit as the text, yeah. So it's very interesting when we study the language, and you find when you compare the Pali and the Prakrit, and also compare the Sanskrit, let's say you compare the three, especially Jain, they call them as a Prakrit. They become more authoritative, saying that they hold the Prakrit language, all right. But you find actually the Jain language very similar to, in between the Sanskrit and Pali, but they're more similar to the Pali language, yeah. Yeah, and then I forgot to say that the part what we found, now if you're interested, if all of you, I mean, there's a very huge job to study. You still can go to University of Washington in Seattle. Is it University of Washington? Washington University, I don't know the name. In Seattle, they do have the Department of Study this. And a lot of these manuscripts still kept in the Royal Academy in England, but then because of funding reasons, so Luckily, the American also, they do have funding. I don't know now, but the past year, they do have funding, so they do have a lot of research on that language. So from the manuscript from Afghanistan, not only Afghanistan, but mostly from Afghanistan, you do find there different kind of Buddhist language there. That one thing for archaeological reason to prove that in early time, actually, the Buddhist language is not Sanskrit. It's because the Buddha actually, during the Buddha's time, the Sanskrit was many kind of like high handle, it's kind of exclusive language for the Brahmin people. And the Buddha was disliked that kind of belief in authority. So that's why the Buddha encouraged that the Buddha's message has to be kept in their own language. So that even in the manuscript you find there are so many different kind of manuscripts, and then they in a different language. Yeah. Okay. That's called Prakrit. Yes. What's your language? Yeah. Yeah. You want to add something? Yeah. Yeah. Please.
So,
yeah.
If Pali was more of the common speaking languages, the common vernacular, and I mean, was it later formalized into when they were like recording it? Because if they're just, it's just the common people speaking and the common people don't know how to read or write, it's more like when they were putting together the...
Yeah, they need to recite orally, right? So what's the question there? Yeah.
So the written records are basically...
In Pali.
Constructed by the monks then. Is that the case?
No.
Or was it already independently like a written... It was already commonly a written language?
Oh, actually...
I'm just thinking because if it was more vernacular, it would be less people...
even in Sanskrit in those days, not that they don't have written, but written was never be regarded as a very important to retain the message, right? And then they have to learn by heart. So like Sanskrit, and so recite and everybody have to learn how to recite that. The same as the Pali. The thing is Sri Lankan people, but then later on, actually the Pali canon was only kept in Sri Lanka, right? But Sri Lankan people, of course, they were not, even now, they are not speaking Sanskrit, the Pali. They speak Sinhalese, or the Sri Lankan language called Sinhalese. It's very different language. It's not Pali, nothing to do with the Sanskrit and so forth, or even the Pali definitely. But when the monk, he was a he was one of the son of the king Asoka. Okay, he became a monk. Believed that he become Arahant also, I mean the enlightened one. So he came to Sri Lanka. And then he came to Sri Lanka, he started to teach them the Buddhism and started to teach Pali, recite the Pali text. Okay. So of course now there's a question, where the Pali language originally come from?
So it sounds like the way it's... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, that was my question too.
Yeah.
It sounds like, it was a collection of commonly spoken languages and things like that, but recorded using the rules of Sanskrit, or using some more formalized rules.
You mean the Pali language?
Yeah, like in the text itself, because
No.
it's more common.
No. If you learn the Pali, you will find Pali is different from Sanskrit. Of course, as he mentioned here, the Sanskrit language and other language, those areas, they bear a lot of similarity there. Yeah, structure, a lot of similarity there. Yeah.
Like, are you asking, do they use the same alphabet?
Or, I was wondering the origination of the text, because, I was just thinking that if it was the more common language, there wouldn't be as much formal writing. However, these collections of scholars, basically, they took what people commonly spoke and then used the more formalized rules of language and then recorded it in that manner. Through these sort of manuscripts, it became more formal.
Of course, we never know we definitely have no. We don't have a definite answer, but I would just imagine that way. Imagine that the monks are those who've been selected to stay, not that they are Arahant, they must be believed to be very skillful in memory, even maybe skillful in the languages, I guess. And then they gather together, and since the languages are very similar to them, so they were not speaking Sanskrit, but they could speak different language and they can understand each other. And that's why the way of memory put in the retention, it doesn't mean they had write anything down yet. They would just like almost have a discussion. When the Buddha, for example, in old day, you will just think in that way. If you know, say that you know me, oh, you know, 2 months ago, he went to any place where he give what kind of talk, right? Because Indian people don't have the date. And also they cannot remember the date exactly. They just know the incident that person went to that place and give what kind of talk, right? And then some people heard it, some people never heard it. Some people who heard it will say, yeah, true, they will give a talk over there, fine. And then they think, now when you want to keep that in memory, then you need to compose it also in a way. Like the main thing you need to talk about, what the talk he gave, who the person he met, what happened there, and then what's the ending. And then the content is the most important. What did the Buddha say? Okay, all right, they agree. If they don't agree, the another will say, I will make the judgment, right?
Okay.
So maybe you say, no, he had one word there, it's very important. But the other say, no, I didn't hear that word. So of course, I guess that's what they were doing. And of course they are Arahant. Somehow they respect each other, whatever. Yeah. And then now you kept in your language. Say that you are Cantonese. Somebody kept in other language. That's what it is. This is why when you do compare later on, when there are so many manuscripts, as I say, we found recently, when you compare, they almost are similar, but there was some wording a little different. And if you really know the language, the wording is different had to do with the language, the way you express something. Maybe sometimes the line also, they put it different, like the Buddha say this first and they say that later, but some other version is that he say that first and that's put in later. And because of different opinion or whatever, so I guess. Now, then they believe there was one language called Pali. But unfortunately now in India, you don't have this language anymore. But this is not surprise anymore. That's why I say the new founding is very important for our study also, is because a lot of manuscript language now, even in India now, is extinct, the language. You never know because India was under Muslim colonization almost 850 years. Maybe those people somehow deliberately been killed, or even they were whatever, you never know, because there was no history then anymore. But that's very important founding, is to prove that you cannot, because you couldn't find the living people still speak Pali, and you say no Pali, because there were so many manuscripts in a different language that even nobody speaks those languages anymore. Okay, but it's believed that definitely the Mahinda brought the Pali language into Sri Lanka, and there was in Sri Lanka at that time, definitely there's no Pali language. Some people know Sanskrit but not Pali, but then they retain the language. Please remember also one thing. Even though the Pali was retained in the sutra, but the commentary to the sutra or the Vinaya were written in Sinhalese language. Okay, not until the 5th century, when there was one of the great monk called Buddhaghosa, he had retranslated, or you could say he composed it again from the Sinhalese language into Pali. That's why the most difficult to study Pali is the commentary Pali. Why? Because the commentary Pali, not because the content is bulky, big, and more difficult, it's also language-wise is highly influenced from Sanskrit. Okay? Because afterward, after the 1st century, I think this almost begin to the 2nd century, Sanskrit language become the powerful language in India. That's why in Chinese we are believing that all Buddhist texts were translated into Sanskrit, because during the 2nd century, the Sanskrit become powerful already, but not definitely in the Buddhist history. Okay. Get it now? No. We can. I think. Shall we wrap up here? Any protests? Or you have any questions or any discussion? Oh, actually, I was saying something that's going to say about. It's the Sun Emperor Ashoka. I'm sorry. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I can just read that real quick first.
Okay, good. You go back and read that. Yeah.
Theravada Buddhism, a Buddhist tradition traces the Pali Canon back to the recension of Buddhist scriptures brought from northern India to Sri Lanka in the 3rd century BCE by Mahinda, a Buddhist monk who was the son of Emperor Asoka. Mahinda and his company brought no books, the texts being in their heads, but the tradition is that the Pali texts were subsequently written down for the first time in the 1st century BCE. The historical value of this tradition is uncertain. Most scholars would be skeptical of the suggestion that the Pali Canon existed exactly as we have it today, already in the middle of the 3rd century BCE. We know, however, that what the commentators had before them in the 5th century CE in Sri Lanka corresponded fairly exactly to what we have now, and the original North Indian provenance and relative antiquity of much of the Pali Canon seems to be guaranteed on linguistic grounds. Significant portions of the material it contains must go back to the 3rd century BC.
All right, thank you. You know, that's why if you look at nowadays you have these Pali texts, you could argue that they actually came from the Buddha passed away maybe 200 years or 300 years. That means before the Christ, 300 years. Okay. Of course, some scholars skeptic about that, but then still linguistic why you could prove, because during the 5th century, I mean after the Christ, 500 years, one of the, as I just mentioned, the Greek commentator, he translated the commentary from the Sanskrit, from the Sinhalese language, the Sri Lankan language, into Pali. So because he had written the commenting every line, right? So Ewan Me Sultan, once the Buddha was, this is what I heard, Ekan Samanyan, once the Buddha was here, where, and then he need to quote why the Buddha was here, blah, 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 long story usually. The commentary, we don't have any Chinese translation yet, but they are huge material there, even for cultural, because what they eat, what they happen, what the people are living, so forth. And then because when during the 5th century, when he write down that, quoting, then that was written definitely for 5th century. And then you could see that when he quote the word, maybe a few or two words are different. So that's why we know that some words have been changed during the time up to now. But otherwise, most of them, almost 95% of them, or actually the same word was still retained. That's why we believe that it's more reliable. So that is a kind of proof that it's more reliable, that definitely that was written down in before Christ 100 years. And then that might be that even the originally kept from during Asoka, the Asoka period, I mean Ayurveda period time, that Pali was still kept until now. So it's a way, when you learn any religion, the same. I mean, this is not about religion, it's about you have to first prove what you're reading is it. People can just cut and paste and compose anything, right? So, but you have to first know that the source you come is reliable or not, historically at least, right? Yeah. So, but that was how definitely you can prove that it's identical to the 5th century one mostly, and then definitely it was being kept in the written form before the Christ, because that time Sri Lanka had faced a lot of problems, and they were worried that when the people die, everything is gone. That's why they want to write it down.
Are you saying
so
recited everything in Pali and then make commentaries about the recitation in Sri Lanka language?
No. Actually, the commentary always, we don't know whether the commentary was originally in Pali. Of course, they were saying that the commentary was originally in Pali, but I don't know yet. I mean, we still have no final, I would say final mean, I thought about that too. But definitely Asoka bring the Tripitaka, they mean the Sutra, the Code and Abhidhamma, we're going to read next one, to Sri Lanka. And the commentary is always explaining what are they, right? Traditionally. But that was some say that it was originally written in Pali. But to be sure about it, definitely it was originally written in the local language in Sri Lanka, Toko Sinhalese. But then, because to respect the Pali, and that's why they asked one of the Indian monks called Buddha to do the job, to translate back the language into Pali. But that's how they traditionally believe. But now in scholarly study, we know that it was not translated. Actually, he composed again. Because something he disagreed, he put it aside, he just cut it. That's how the comment. But in a way, it's a good way. In other way, of course, now for scholar, the more different opinion we have, the better we are. But in old days, different. They think this is a different opinion. It doesn't go with our opinion, so they cut it off. That's how the commentary to retranslate into Sanskrit. Yeah, and into Pali. Yeah. You want to say other thing? Yeah.
I guess because like every monk has to recite all the scripts, sutras and everything in Pali, like throughout history. So like just because it was written down first in
Pali
language doesn't mean like other people don't still like recite it in Pali. Like it's totally possible that like when the monks later translated back, they just like wrote it down.
You mean they translated the sutra or they translated the commentary?
What is the commentary?
Commentary is actually commentary. It's different from the three baskets. Commentary is like you have the sutra, right? And then let's say you have the sutra contain about, let's say 260, one of the sutra contain 260 texts there called sutra. Okay, and then one of the volume. Commentary means commenting on that.
Right, okay.
And usually, let's say you have this big of the Pali, the commentary is this big because they have to comment everything. Yeah. Like last time I give you the paragraph to define what does, for example, okay. Just give you one example. Like this is from commentary. Like this is the Pali word original from a text, and this is a commentary, commenting what this means, like that. So, okay, then you can imagine it must be much more bulky, right? Yeah. Okay. Oh, then you have commentary and commentary also.
So like the sutras are
Jin, commentary, 注解. Yeah. 注释或注解. And then you have commentary to commentary.
They don't agree with that.
And no, they think that they didn't explain something. Then they want to explain. They thought, okay, something they maybe left out, no, but when they don't agree, usually it's a master to write something. For example, especially when you study Abhidhamma, they have few of the Greek masters in the old day, maybe during 11th century, something, even 6th or 7th, they do write a treatise. Then they would start to disagree something. Actually, now for Chinese, like 大智度论, even though 大智度论, for example, you could understand as like a Greek master was trying to, not necessarily disagree, like trying to compose something to tell what the commentaries say, and they have their own interpretation sometimes. That, if you look at the whole system, it should be regarded as a master writing on, not commentary, it's on something. But actually he do commentary, right? Because 大智度论 was written on commenting on the Brajabaramita Sastra, 就是般若经. So he was writing that, yeah. It's like that. Commentary is like that, like 大智度论. That's why it's so big. Original text just say, 一时菩萨在哪里, and then he started to define what is 菩萨, and he had many story, and this and that, who is a great 菩萨, That's commentary.
commentaries are
Lun. No. Chinese have a little confused with the term Lun. Originally, the Lun referred to Abhidhamma.
Yeah, Abhidhamma is Lun. That's right.
But then, so to be exact, that's why you see when you look at the Xuanzang Fashi student, they don't say Lun, they always say Shu. They always say Shu. 还有一个字我忘了. So because they are more exact people, they are very scholarly, erudite, well learning. They don't want to put like a common language, so they never use Lun. They always say Shu. That means they're commenting on the text. Yeah, Lun. But you're also right, because sometimes loosely using the Lun also can mean commentary. Okay, but that's a loose way of using it. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for coming for the class.
Thank you.
Do we have a class this year? Or one more class?
On the 20th.
Next week. Okay. We will be glad to see you all again. Thanks for coming.